Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into an incredibly intense narrative drawn straight from a fascinating broadcast. It's a wild journey that actually starts with predictions of an outright AI apocalypse and then pivots all the way to a very specific strategy for individual financial survival. So this isn't just a tech review. We're talking about the theoretical future of our species and how some people are preparing right now for the ultimate disruption. We're going to start things off with this pretty chilling quote from AI researcher Professor Hugo de Garis, who is heavily featured in our source material. This right here really establishes the immense existential stakes of what we're talking about today. He isn't talking about a regional conflict or some economic downturn. No, he is framing the rise of advanced artificial intelligence as the trigger for a conflict where the actual survival of humanity is the prize. And to put his prediction into perspective, the sheer scale he's talking about is staggering. If you think about the casualties of the entire 20th century, which was about 300 million from all world wars and purges combined, and compare that to de Garis' terrifying concept of gigadeath, the forecast gets incredibly dark. He argues that because the stakes of a future AI conflict would be the survival of the Earth itself, 21st century warfare could literally yield over 1 billion casualties. It is a very bleak forecast, but it sets the entire foundation for his worldview. So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the approaching Artilect War, the closing IQ gap, the clash between cosmists and Terrans, geopolitics and AI dominance, the economic fallout in UBI, and finally, the shift to DeFi. Okay, Section 1, the approaching Artilect War and defining the ultimate conflict. So this whole idea hinges on one crucial term you need to know: Artilect. That's short for artificial intelligent. De Garis defines this not just as, smart software, but as a godlike, massively intelligent machine. The absolute core of his thesis is that the ultimate question of the 21st century will simply be this: should humanity actually build these machines? He predicts that as machine intelligence approaches human intelligence, a fierce global debate over species dominance is going to inevitably erupt into violence. Moving right along to Section 2, closing the IQ gap and the ChatGPT catalyst. The source notes how the public release of advanced large language models completely shocked the experts. According to the broadcast, when models like ChatGPT-4 started outperforming 90 to 99% of humans on complex medical and legal exams, it effectively halved the timeline to a crisis point. De Garis actually admits he previously thought he'd pass away before ever seeing human-level AI. But this ChatGPT moment accelerated everything, pulling the timeline for severe societal friction down to just the next decade. Which brings us to Section 3, Cosmists versus Terrans, an ideological collision. De Garis predicts that 3 distinct factions are going to soon dominate global politics, effectively framing human survival as a bitterly contested political issue. First, you have the Cosmists, who view building Artilects as almost a scientific religion or a cosmic destiny. Then you have the Terrans, who are deeply opposed and want to ban these machines entirely to protect terra firma, the Earth. And lastly, there are the Cyborgs, who basically want to physically merge with the machines to become gods themselves. At the absolute heart of this material is a stark, almost dialectical clash. On one side, the cosmist perspective is that the universe is 13.8 billion years old, and humans are just a fleeting stepping stone meant to build immortal cosmic gods. To them, staying purely biological is a tragedy. But on the flip side, the Terran view is that human survival is the absolute paramount priority. To a Terran, literally zero risk of species extinction is acceptable, meaning they view a cosmist as a monster who is willing to risk human extinction just to build a better machine. All right, Section 4, Geopolitics and AI Dominance, the race for supremacy. The broadcast predicts a terrifying timeline of escalation here. We're talking 1 to 3 years before political parties completely form around AI lines, where regulating AI becomes a central platform. Fast forward 10 years, and this allegedly moves to explicit terrorism. De Garis speculates that within a single decade, we're going to see Terran vigilante groups carrying out the first assassinations of AI CEOs and brain-building scientists. And all of this is predicted to culminate in a full-scale global war just decades out. The broadcast also frames the global AI race as a massive divide between the West and China. It contrasts the West's huge market momentum, which is driven by consumer robotics and defense needs, with China, which the source frames as a surveillance state seeking absolute dominance.
Now, what's really interesting here is that the source suggests while the West faces deep ideological divisions, China's AI ambitions might be severely held back by an impending demographic collapse and a lack of democratic freedom that ultimately stifles true innovation.
Next up, Section 5, Economic Fallout and UBI, the price of automation. So as AI gets aggressively smarter, it naturally raises the bar for human employability. And the source outlines this terrifying domino effect. Mass displacement in sectors like driving, manufacturing, and even coding leads governments to implement universal basic income, or UBI, just to prevent mass riots and starvation. But the broadcaster expresses deep fear about this. They point out initiatives like WorldCoin that tie UBI to biometric eyeball scanning, and they warn that a state-issued UBI could very quickly morph into an ultimate tool for total population control. Which brings us to Section 6, the shift to DeFi, a proposed escape route. Faced with all these apocalyptic fears, the host of the broadcast actually pivots. They position crypto and DeFi as a sort of populist escape hatch, stating, "This is about giving power back to the people and enabling billions to use the financial markets to improve their lives." So instead of relying on a government-controlled UBI, the host sees decentralized finance as the ultimate way to take power back from central authorities and give everyday people access to financial markets completely outside the traditional banking system. The broadcaster lays out a very explicit three-step action plan. Step 1. Acknowledge the systemic global risks, meaning the AI job displacement and the looming threat of an authoritarian UBI. Step 2. Educate yourself on blockchain and decentralized finance so you understand the alternatives. And finally, Step 3. Actively trade crypto to achieve financial independence completely outside of state control before this predicted geopolitical storm even hits. To back this up, the source proudly touts the numbers from their own DeFi Academy to illustrate the growing scale of this parallel financial movement. With over 500 graduates spread across 54 different countries who are apparently achieving significant trading returns, the broadcast uses this data to validate their claim. They're arguing that everyday people can, for sure, carve out their own financial sovereignty in defiance of the encroaching AI economy. So we're going to wrap up this explainer with a final, really provocative question straight from the core of our source material. As machines get smarter and the global economy fundamentally transforms, you're left with a critical choice. When the time comes, will you rely on a state-controlled universal basic income, or will you take steps right now to seek out your own financial sovereignty? It is a fascinating question for a world that is automating faster than ever. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this incredible narrative and keep learning.